I've been a huge fan of Diablo 2 ever since I was 10, playing it at a friend's house for the very first time, and back then my mind was blown. When my parents brought my first computer, Diablo 2 filled hundreds of hours of my life, and like many of you, I'm sure it has become that icon that other RPGs are always compared to. Diablo 3 was cool when it got released because of the excitement, but after playing it, I was quite disappointed. The Diablo 2 feeling just wasn't there. And Diablo Immortal, even without the unbelievable money grab, was not a great game. So this brings me to Diablo 4. As I was following its development, it looked interesting in graphics and mechanics, so I decided to pick it up and give it a really good chance. And this is going to be my first impression video of the March open beta version, where I'm going to exclude the server issues, deleted characters or other weird problems at this point, and focus on what I found more interesting. But I am going to be super picky about all the good and the bad that I saw. Diablo 4 being an MMO ARPG should be the biggest indicator that this is never going to be Diablo 2. And even though you have the chance to spend a pretty good part of the game alone, you'll also see plenty of other characters popping up here and there, and not for the worse once you get used to it. During this beta we had access to 3 classes, the Barbarian, the Sorceress and the Rogue, which was sad news to me because I really wanted to play the Druid, the first class I ever played in Diablo 2, but at least I'll have something fresh to pick on later on. From this, I thought I understood what Barbarians are all about. Wizards are super flashy and bound to be fun, so I decided in the end to pick a Rogue, the new class. Now there's enough customization options for all of them to make you believe that you gave it the personality you wanted, and me personally, I went for the Rogue look from Kasha's squad. Thumbs up on customization for now, plenty of options to pick from. As the game starts, I was impressed with the cinematics and the seamless transition between them and the game. The starting area gives you chills as you try to figure out why are you out here and what is your mission when you stumble upon a village. And I'm not going to spoil it for you, but it's pretty crazy what happens here, even though you can see it from a mile away, just because of how weird the conversation is. Still, this intro reminded me of Diablo 2, and for that I really loved it. The voice acting was pretty good, not only here but throughout Act 1. But am I the only one getting tired of this voice?
I'm sorry, it's a bit... Alenta went a bit deaf last winter. You might need to... Don't let Oswin bother you. I'm sorry, it's a bit cramped.
Fire's looking good.
Why do games keep bringing this Eastern European Slavic accent whenever there's snow? Like the accent is tied to the Siberian cold or something. The voice acting though is not without its issue. Your character speaks during conversations, but sometimes you can pick what you want to ask and your character does not say it, you just get a response. In the same conversation though, later on your character speaks once again, and it becomes weird to follow by not being consistent on whether you talk or not. It feels like they removed the starting lines just to reduce costs. And I thought at first that this was just a personal annoyance, so let me fix it by removing the automatic speech progression so that I can progress the speech on click and read through the lines. And well, you have to see it to believe it.
That's quite the story.
I wish it wasn't true, but it is.
After a line, the world stops. Well, almost. The fire still goes on here. And I feel like Blizzard might have complicated themselves here with the system when they could have the characters just move back and forth and have the voice over it. This was taking me out of the story, so I just went back to automatic progression and continued my journey. When it comes to quests, I liked especially that many of the side quests also have progression, where you will meet characters multiple times over a storyline. I'm going to give you an example using a minor side quest here, but it's going to be a spoiler, so skip the timeline if you do not want to hear it. You find a sister who is an exorcist, and you help her remove a demon from a child by protecting her while she performs the ritual. And that is pretty much the quest. You might think you're done. Later on though, you can find her again, and you can help her exorcise the husband of a woman. He runs away and you give chase. And once inside the sewer, a fight ensues, the husband dies together with the demon and the sister gets hurt. And once again, you might think that the quest is over, until you find the questline again with a message from the sister that tells you that the demon used her as a vessel to escape in the last fight, and that all of a sudden you need to perform the exorcism. You fetch a bunch of stuff, perform the ritual, and at least for as far as I played this open beta, that is it. This was just one example, where in others you will find people and their questlines span over multiple villages, making you remember small characters and the consequences that your actions might have, be they good or bad. And it might not seem like such a big deal, but it really complements the main storyline, and it brings it closer to that feeling of the cold reality of Diablo 2, rather than getting the feeling of being the chosen one of Diablo 3. And for that reason, I really loved it. Overall, story-wise, with a few immersion-breaking moments here and there, Act 1 was quite nice, and I'm super hopeful that the story will be good and that we will find out more as we play along. And please, Blizzard, don't let the ending be "the power of love fixes everything." Let's move on from story and voiceovers and focus on skills and fights next. When it comes to character skills, there's definitely a unique feeling to each and every one of them. And let's be honest, the skill tree at the beginning of the game, it's not revolutionary. I kept hearing this in other videos, but I have no idea what they're talking about. This is not revolutionary. Maybe the end game will be, but we will have to test it first. So, not revolutionary, but I liked it a lot. I started with a multi-shot attack with the bow, combined it with a freezing trap, imbued the arrows with shadow damage which exploded when killing enemies, and ended it with a rain of arrows. At the same time, there's plenty of secondary effects for each skill that you can pick and combine, for example having a passive skill which gave me extra damage against frozen enemies, which I would be able to do with the traps that I was throwing around. It was really cool once I gained enough abilities to mix and match into a playstyle which I enjoyed. The rogue also has this unique specialization to pick from with different effects. The one that I played with the most, combo points, offered me up to 3 tokens when using my basic attack skill, and each of them offered double damage and extra arrow per shot when using the multi-arrow core skill. And having this reason to use multiple skills, it's a big plus in my book. I have 3 issues at this moment though with the skills, especially playing in more challenging difficulties from tier 2 onwards. The first one is the resource that you use for skills. I never played another ARPG where I felt the need for a resource or mana potion like in this one, and there's no solution for it. My rogue's first skill after the basic one had a more inaccurate attack, and after 3 shots I was already out of energy. The damage wasn't enough to kill the enemies, and my basic attack was even worse, which forced me into getting very close in melee range with the bow in order to do decent damage. And here comes my second problem. You might be wondering, doesn't the rogue dual wield swords and daggers? Yes, but unless you buy into a skill that does melee damage, the rogue doesn't have a basic melee attack, meaning that those weapons are useless. The barbarian is packed with weapons, but unless you use a skill which uses that weapon, the equipment is useless. How do you know which weapon you need for a specific skill? Well, sometimes it's obvious from the icon or text, but not always. And here consistencies hurt the experience once again. Can you see how confusing this can become at the beginning? Which brings me nicely to my third issue. The cost of respeccing the skill tree going up in the developer's word because it's more impactful and at certain point being cheaper to level up a new character than resetting the tree. This is not an easy skill tree to understand without experimenting, and you'll be using plenty of skill resets by the time you have something you're happy with, which means that at some point you might find yourself bricked in the endgame. I don't see the impactful choice that the developers are talking about. This is a created problem from my point of view that doesn't need to be here. And I've got this bad feeling that we're gonna see respec skill tree for $0.99 in the game's shop. Hopefully not. Overall, I like the skill system and there's plenty of cool combinations to try out and enjoy. It is a good start, I have to say, and I'm looking forward to the endgame of D4. A quick note on difficulty, since I mentioned it earlier, and let's also talk about boss battles. The tier 2 difficulty level is challenging and fun, and at this level the boss battles are interesting, forcing you to figure out their attack pattern as it scales up through different phases. With each phase down, two things happen. The enemy is dropping you some much needed health potion where it gives you a chance at winning even the first time without overpowering you. And at the same time, the boss gets new abilities that you need to look out for. There's a variety in the bosses and I had a lot of fun taking them down, plus they dropped some good loot, so it was all worth it. I have only one little problem with the bosses right now. There was a boss early on, for example, which I attempted, whose melee attack I could not avoid no matter how much I ran around. Like, he was catching up to me and he was damaging me, except if I was dodging, which I could do at this point only once every 5 seconds. And that made me sad, because it meant that right there, it didn't matter how skilled I was at the game. You needed to find a way to increase your stats, otherwise you can't really beat a mechanic. And that's really bad for hardcore characters, especially. Now I hope that they will fix this someday, and I believe that they will, but you have to see it the first time to actually believe it. Diablo 4's first region was quite expansive and I spent many hours exploring around, looking for quests and events, and more importantly loot. At times a region gets fully explored and sometimes it doesn't. I don't know why, once again it's one of those problems of consistency. I prefer it when it doesn't, as it does give me a reason to explore every nook and cranny. There's also a mechanic in the game where you jump over ledges, climb up and down, crawl and so on, and I was thinking that I could have done a bit more with these interact mechanics if they didn't show it to us on the map where we could do it and we had to figure it out. Like finding secrets in areas by crawling through a cave only to find a chest with special items. But this might not work as well in an MMORPG with respawning loot. This mechanic worked quite nice though in a fortress battle where I could run away from enemies and shoot at them from over the ledge and having to rethink my strategy of attack whenever I needed to. So that was nice. In order to encourage map exploration, there's plenty of map goals that you can complete, which in turn will give you account-wide benefits. These benefits just provide you with a small boost on every character that you create in that zone, providing for example an extra skill point or some gold, with decent value, which didn't feel overpowered at all. It was more like skipping a tutorial bonus, and I enjoyed that. When it comes to the MMO part of the game, I played this game mostly alone, meeting players only in towns and in areas where random events were happening. At first I didn't like that, especially after working so hard to clear a fortress for the very first time, to have the joy of opening a chest being stripped away from me by another player. But the gear dropped is not shared with other players on these random events, so you don't have to worry about someone else stealing your hard-earned reward. After playing for a while, I found myself on multiple occasions dropping by one of these random events whenever I was going towards some quest, only to discover that it was halfway completed by someone else, gave them a helping hand, and got some good rewards with little to no work done on my own. Overall, that was a pretty good feeling, I have to say. Remember those old objectives from MMOs where you had to gather 10 wolf pelts by killing wolves with a drop chance of maybe 5%, only to be stuck in that area for 15-20 minutes because there were so many people farming them? None of that. From the events that I found so far, none had a problem where joining in one of these fights would make someone fail their objective, and that is great for an MMO and having people work together. Still, not being alone can once again break the immersion in certain areas, especially close to towns when you pick up quests. There was a sad moment I remember of a father seeing the ghost of his son begging him to come visit, and two more players were picking up the same quest, and it was clear that we were all waiting for the dialogue to be done and receive the quest. Now take a look.
Is that...
No! No, no! No! You're dead!
Father? Won't you come visit me?
No! They took you away for what you did. You...
Father, please visit. I'm waiting at the asylum.
It's hard to even give a story a chance in a situation like this. In closing of these first impressions, I like Diablo 4 at this point. It took me about 30 minutes to get over the disappointment that this is not Diablo 2, and it took me another 30 minutes to be like, meh, on the idea that this would somehow be a revolutionary ARPG that will eliminate the competition. From the first hour forward, I spent another 20 to 30 hours just enjoying Diablo 4 for what it is. A decent game before release, and I really hope that it stays the same. And this is all that I'm going to cover for today. I've got a few more notes on the ARPG elements and class builds, about gear and crafting, but I'm going to talk about them in a different video later on, as the devs unlock more content. I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts on D4 are as well in the comments below, and if you did enjoy this video, do consider leaving a like, would be much appreciated, and subscribe to see more in the future. With that being said, have a wonderful day everyone.